Northern Italy is a land of passion, imagination, and extraordinary style. It is a place where remarkable hand craftsmanship is used to create some of the most unique and exclusive motorcycles in the world. Bimota, a very rare brand of motorcycle, has always been cutting edge when it comes to design.
Revolutionary is a good word. Always leading edge, always avant-garde, always taking risk.
Alpinestars, another Italian company, makes a high-end version of Italian leather goods. Except these leathers aren't fashion statements, but clothing to keep motorcycle riders and racers as safe as possible.
It's a combination of old-world hand-done craftsmanship with leading-edge science backed by years of research into what hurts us when we crash.
Here we have a very scientific way of understanding exactly how the leather performs should a rider slide down the road.
Both Bimota and Alpinestars rely on classic Italian hand craftsmanship. One is like the Lamborghini of the two-wheeled world. The other, like the Versace of the racetracks. High-end Italian luxury at a premium price. What do you get for your money? Something unique, something different, and something very, very Italian. Most visitors to Rimini, Italy, go for fun in the sun. But there is another reason to visit Rimini, because it is the home of Bimota, one of the most exclusive motorcycle brands in the world.
Bimota has come up with some ideas that make motorcycles into art, and it's not really available anywhere else.
Centuries ago, Rimini was an important outpost of the Roman Empire. Today, it is one of the most famous seaside resorts along Italy's Adriatic Riviera. It is a beach lover's paradise, and it gets warm in the summer. That's the reason Bimota originally started as a heating and air conditioning company.
Bimota actually started with three gentlemen, Mr. Bianchi, Mr. Mori, Mr. Tamburini, each of whom donated two of their letters from their last name into forming Bimota in the heating and air conditioning business. And they were doing sheet metal ducting and building tubing and those kinds of things. And it turns out that Mr. Tamburini was a motorcycle nut.
Mr. Tamburini was Massimo Tamburini, a man who would become one of the greatest motorcycle designers of all time. And if he hadn't crashed while racing a Honda in 1972, Bimota might still be installing heaters and air conditioners. While recovering from 3 broken ribs, Tamburini got the idea to use what he knew about metal pipes to build a new frame for his motorcycle.
Mr. Tamburini built a frame for his Honda single cam 750, took it to the racetrack, and when he was running around the racetrack, he started getting noticed.
The frame Tamburini built for himself lowered the weight and center of gravity of his Honda. It also lowered his lap times around the track.
It was an extremely fast bike, and shortly thereafter he started having people come up to him and say, would you make a frame for my bike?
Massimo Tamburini realized he could make money selling other people his frames. In 1973, he changed his heating and air conditioning company into a tiny motorcycle factory. He called the first design HB1, H for Honda, B for Bimota, and 1 because it was the first motorcycle Bimota had ever built.
When you think about the history of Bimota, you kind of think about eras. And the eras are more or less defined by the chief engineers of the time, or the chief designers. Obviously, Massimo Tamburini was the first one. The benchmark there would have to be the HB1, which was the first bike he built. They only built 10 of them.
The fact that Bimota only built 10 HB1s began a tradition of exclusivity for the company. Every Bimota model has always been a limited production run. That's one reason Bimota has always been on the cutting edge of high-end Italian motorcycle design.
One of the reasons why Bimota has had so many leading breakthrough designs and things that became the standard of the industry 10 years later is because they only build 100 units of every model they do.
As a really small motorcycle company, Bimota couldn't afford to design and build its own engines. So until 1978, Tamburini sold kits that would allow people to build their own Bimota using a donor bike for the motor.
They didn't offer bikes originally. They offered frame kits where you would buy a complete Japanese motorcycle, you'd take the engine out, you'd take the wiring harness off, you'd take some of the controls off, you'd take the instruments off, you build it into this kit you bought from him, and now you had a GP replica bike.
They had the correct idea, in my opinion, is to buy existing engines and stick them in the chassis that we would all make if we could make a cool chassis and make all the cool parts.
During the 1970s and 80s, Bimota built bikes powered by Suzuki, Yamaha, and Honda engines. They were very successful on the racetrack, but ironically, it's difficult to be precise about just how many races Bimota won.
Bimota has a great racing history. It's a little muddy sometimes because no one kept good records in those days.
Who sponsored the bike was also part of the reason Bimota's racing records are confusing. A racer named John Eckerle won Bimota's first world championship in 1980.
John Eckerle was the first one that finally won a world championship on a Bimota. And the reason he won on a Bimota was because he tried to get sponsorship from Yamaha, and Yamaha wouldn't give him sponsorship. So he went out and he bought the engines. Bimota gave him sponsorship, so now he was actually riding a Bimota, and in 1980, he won the world championship in the GP350 class.
Bimota's history has always been linked to its head designer. In 1983, Massimo Tamburini was hired away to work at one of the largest motorcycle companies in Italy. Tamburini's replacement was a young engineer named Federico Martini. He wasted no time putting his creative mark on Bimota. For the first time, new Bimotas were being built with a unique aluminum frame.
He did two very significant bikes. The first one he did was the YB4. The YB4 is the first bike that was in production that had a perimeter aluminum frame around it.
The new frame design proved its worth on the racetrack. In 1987, a YB4 won Bimota's second world championship. Over the years, the owners and chief engineers of Bimota have kept changing, but the essence of what a Bimota should be remained constant. Limited production of cutting-edge design, all hand-built with remarkable craftsmanship.
It's almost as if it's the same guy doing this. It's not. Change of ownership, new engineers. Who knows how many people are still there from 30 years ago, but it's the same idea behind it. Let's build stuff super, super trick. Let's make it work really, really well. Let's price it way up high and create an artwork piece of motorcycle that goes down the road really well.
The other thing that Federico Martini did was design the DB1. The DB1 is very special because it was the first all-Italian bike that Bimota made.
All Italian because the DB1, like all current Bimotas, is powered by an engine built by Ducati. In 1990, Pierluigi Marconi became the third head engineer at Bimota and the man who took the biggest risk yet. He created a radical design that eliminated the traditional forks and front end on a motorcycle and connects the front wheel with a very different structure. The idea is to keep the weight of the bike off the front wheel. The bike is called the Tesi.
The reason they call it the Tesi is because when Pierluigi Marconi had done his thesis on alternate front suspensions for his PhD at the University of Bologna, the word Tesi in Italian means thesis.
Other companies have tried experimenting with unusual front suspensions for bikes, but Bimota is the only one that actually builds that kind of motorcycle.
Back in the early 90s, I raced at Bimota at Daytona. The Bimota group came over, they brought a Tesi for me, and here I was thinking, oh, I'm going to ride this crazy work of art that is a lot of theories and doesn't going to go very well. And man, right away from the first practice, we were pretty quick on it and ran right up in the front with it.
The Tesi, like all Bimotas, has an Italian sensibility that blends performance with passion. A passion that sometimes is difficult to put into words.
When I think of Bimota, I get pictures in my head. I don't get words. You know, words don't sort of, it's not a verbal kind of thing. It's kind of a, visual passion.
Visual, visceral, and emotional. But then what would you expect from one of the most rare and exclusive motorcycles in the world? Bimota's new motorcycle line started with a bike called the DB5. It is classically Bimota, Italian, exotic, and different.
The DB5 represents sort of that return to all the positives that Italy brings to that kind of handmade exotic motorcycle. What Bimota does with it is they're so focused on lightness, and they're so focused on an exciting chassis geometry and good handling and beautiful, beautiful parts. DB5, it's an emotional riding experience.
An emotional experience tied to the exclusivity of the brand.
It's not like a piece of transportation. It's not like a mechanical object. If you appreciate art, then you can appreciate this.
Very few people have ever had the opportunity to actually ride a Bimota.
If you could afford one of these things, this is unquestionably the finest performing motorcycle you can buy at any price in the world. It was the, Ferrari, Lamborghini of the motorcycle world.
There's one more bike in Bimota's lineup. It's called the Delirio. It has the soul of the DB5 sport bike, but its ride position is less severe.
The Delirio is basically, it delivers what the DB5 delivers in a sort of comfortable riding position, but you've got that position of power that you get from dirt bikes where you've got a little bit more, leverage and comfort, and, you kind of muscle around a little bit more.
In a good year, Bimota makes 500 motorcycles. Each one is virtually hand-built, which is what makes Bimota both rare and expensive. The entry price into this motorcycle club is more than $30,000. This is the factory for Bimota motorcycles, one of the most rare and exclusive brands in the world.
It's not a factory like we bring in, people from the stock market and try to get them to invest in our company. This is just a building where, love of building motorcycles is everywhere.
It's more of an artisan's workshop than a motorcycle factory. and it's not easy to find. At Bimota, the focus is on their unique bikes, not on their building.
So you drive in this neighborhood and you're looking for the address the first time, and you know it's number 38, and you're on the right road, and you're driving around and you're looking for a factory, and there is no factory. And when you get here, you go past it, and you go, oh, I passed it, and then you have to turn around and come back, and then you see literally a logo on the front of the building that's no bigger than 1.5 feet in diameter, and it says B.
The factory is really a classic Italian workshop for artists who just happen to be making motorcycles. Everything is done by hand, and the goal is something between obsession and perfection. Like spending hours with a hand-operated lathe to mill the perfect oil filler cap out of billet aluminum, engraved with a simple B for Bimota.
The passion at Bimota has been the thing that they've sustained through different owners.
I think motorcycles in general have a lot of passion, and in these particular ones, you just see it coming through with the quality and the attention to detail that people have on these things. You see it coming through in the bright red frame. You see it coming through in the polished aluminum pieces, and there's nothing on that bike that is just a part for doing some function. I mean, every piece on that bike is the best it can be.
There is no assembly line at Bimota. It's a workshop where at most they can build 4 or 5 bikes in one day. And each motorcycle is hand-built, from start to finish.
The way they build motorcycles at Bimota is almost the way an artist would build a piece of sculpture or a painter would do a painting.
With tools and parts neatly lined up, the build begins by slowly and carefully adding the front section of the frame to the engine. There's no sense of urgency. Watching the rear frame and suspension go on, it's clear that it takes as long as it takes to build a Bimota. At least one full day just for final assembly. The front triple clamp, forks, and wheel come next. All the custom-made pieces are beginning to take the form of a motorcycle.
This guy feels a certain sense of pride. He gets to feel all the beautifully machined, handmade parts that go on this thing. And if you notice, like, they take the time to put a little fingerful of grease on some of the parts, and they loosely put things together, and then they've got the torque wrench, and everything is hand torqued to the right specification. He must have stopped 5 or 6 times in the process and took out a clean rag and wiped his fingerprints off of the frame, because this is what he does. He doesn't want to even look at fingerprints on this beautiful piece of artwork that he's building, this sculptor that he's sculpting. He wants to make sure that every time he turns around to put something back on this thing, it's as beautiful as it can be, and that really kind of shows you the way these people feel about the job they're doing.
Even final testing is hands-on. There's no computer checking the data. The man who built the bike fires it up. And then he'll take it out for a test ride. It's the old-fashioned way of building and testing a brand new bike.
There's a certain passion in the guy downstairs that fires it up for the first time and rides it around the block. And these guys really are motorcycle people. They're not just assembly workers that are going to a job in the morning.
And this is something you'd never see in any other motorcycle factory. The guys who built the bike from start to finish end their day by building a shipping crate for their creation. Another Bimota is about to leave the factory. Somewhere, some lucky owner is about to have a completely hand-built motorcycle sitting in their garage. The streets in the northern Italian town of Asolo tell a remarkable story of time and artistry. Main Street is more than 1,000 years old and so narrow, cars can only drive in one direction. Other streets in town pay homage to centuries of writers and artists who lived and worked here, including English poet Robert Browning. Asolo is a tiny hilltop town where technology is measured in terms of millennium. The fountain in the plaza is still fed by an ancient Roman aqueduct. Just outside of town is a place where artisans practice the centuries-old craft of Italian leather making. Except these days, their art is all about keeping motorcycle riders and racers safe. Historically, riding and racing motorcycles has always been dangerous. For years, what riders wore for protection was more of an afterthought than a conscious decision on how to manage the risk. As late as the 1980s, racers rarely walked away from a crash without serious injury.
My bike slid. I couldn't get my hand out in time and went down so fast, so it broke my hand right here.
Casts on both hands, big high side in qualifying, didn't even think I was going to be able to race.
Alpinestars is a company focused on managing the risk of riding a motorcycle. They specialize in top-of-the-line motorcycle riding and racing gear. Boots, gloves, back protectors, and their custom-made, handcrafted full-piece racing leathers. Alpinestars riding gear can be seen on the roads and racetracks around the world. But each piece is designed, tested, and handcrafted at their headquarters outside of Asolo. Alpinestars is a company whose original focus was on the trek, not the track.
Alpinestars as a company was founded in 1963, initially building ski boots and mountain hiking boots. We're only a few miles from the Alpine Dolomites here, so there's a heritage for mountain climbing and trekking. But also there's a strong motorcycle fraternity here.
On the first floor of the Alpinestars building, there's what looks like a high-fashion Italian showroom. It's open to the public. Except for helmets, you can find anything you need to protect yourself on a motorcycle. But in the basement, which is off limits to visitors, it's not fashion, but function that matters. This is where all Alpinestar riding gear is designed and tested. To reduce the risk of injury in a crash, nothing can be left to chance because even the best racers crash without warning.
5 seconds in front and I fell down with 3 laps to go. What was I thinking?
They call this the walk meter machine, where boots are put through 100,000 cycles, the equivalent of walking 35 miles. But the test is really about how the boot will perform when riding. Will it hold up to the stress and strain of sudden major impact?
Obviously, the foot is a complex piece of physiological anatomy, and it's very important to stop the force of an impact being transmitted in a very pure form straight to the joints of the foot or up to the knee.
Absorbing the force of an impact and spreading that energy out away from the body are fundamental concepts for all protective riding gear. Here, a new back protector is being tested by repeatedly dropping a 10-pound weight and measuring where the energy from the impact goes. This test will be repeated hundreds of times.
The initial impact spread is important because it prevents the actual impact energy being directed straight through the protector into the rider's body.
The back protector is really a two-part system, using a hard shell over a soft padded liner.
The profile of this protector is very thin. It also is allowed to move naturally with the rider in the right direction, but not to hyperextend in the wrong direction backwards.
The back protector uses man-made thermoplastic and gels to protect the rider. But when it comes to the actual riding suits, leather is still the material of choice. Very thick leather.
Because motorcycling is dynamic, and in the event of an accident, you know, there's a lot of abrasion, a lot of impact, we specify 1.4 to 1.2 millimeter thickness of leather. It's considerably thicker than the average fashion garment because when the time comes, it has to go through a much more rigorous test of its properties.
The abrasion test machine runs pads of sandpaper over different leather samples in a scientifically controlled environment to make sure the leather will provide enough protection in the event of a crash. Surprisingly, the wrong color of leather dyes can reduce the leather's ability to withstand a crash.
In treating the leather with different colors, it can actually affect the performance of the leather. A simple example is the red and the silver both passed the test, while the blue and the green, in this case, failed the test.
The next key to protection is to make sure that all the seams in the leather riding suit are strong enough. For that, they use another machine that stresses each test seam until it finally fails.
So here we're seeing the actual trace for the force being submitted to the material in the machine. In the event of an accident, a rider coming off a motorcycle, a very sudden, large force is often subjected to the seam. On the monitor here, you can see the force readout that the seam and the material is being subjected to. 1,000 newtons on the scale here equates roughly to 500 pounds of force. So we're looking for that as the minimum standard that we require. So here, in this case, this sample broke above that, so we've exceeded our own in-house standards.
Over the past 5 to 10 years, such high-tech lab work has produced riding gear that has significantly reduced the number and severity of injuries to both riders and racers. To maximize protection, each leather racing suit is custom fit and handcrafted for individual racers.
This is our leather suit development process, and here on screen we're looking at a design we've done for Troy Corser, the world superbike rider with the Yamaha team. From the graphic design on the computer screen, we now move to full-size panel drawings, where we're now creating the actual panels that we use to cut out the leather suit.
The computer prints out a complete diagram of each piece for each suit. The paper parts are then cut out by hand and transferred to stiff cardboard, which becomes the actual templates for cutting out the leather.
key to this is the hand skill involved in selecting particular parts of the hide to produce complementary parts of the suit, so that the suit ends up looking balanced and features the best possible safety performance across each part of the suit. One of the skills in doing this job is to make the most of the entire hide.
It's a combination of old world hand-done craftsmanship with leading-edge science backed by years of research into what hurts us when we crash.
Once all the parts are cut and ready, they're delivered to the workshop, a large room where dozens of people will each play a part in creating one more perfect riding suit.
In the actual production facility, we're looking at the final process where we brought together all the component parts of the leather suit, and they start at one end of the line, and over about a 2-day period we're in a great deal of handwork, detailed stitching, both of panels, of stretch panels, of logos, and the safety equipment that we build into the suit.
Walking in the Alpinestars factory, for instance, you'll see a bunch of Italian women sewing things together by hand, and you'll think to yourself, well, here's an old world leather shop where they're making shoes, from hundreds of years ago. But what you're really seeing is women fashioning together leading edge, scientifically derived equipment that protects a motorcycle racer when things go wrong.
And this is the final result. This is one of Troy Corse's finished suits, ready for him to go racing. And all of those components that we've already looked at, from the external shoulder protection, stretch panels, and the actual hand-cut leather panels, which have all been perforated, is finally put together in a finished suit that should fit him perfectly when he goes out on the racetrack.
One of the secrets to modern motorcycle riding gear is that it's designed to alter time, to extend the split second of impact for as long as possible. The padded hump on the back of the leather suit is the key to scientifically measuring the forces involved when riding, racing, and accidents when they happen.
Originally this was put here for more an aerodynamic reason, but additionally, should the rider fall backwards onto his back and hit his head against the ground, it does also provide a little bit of support between the head and the body to prevent an extreme bend of the neck. However, the beauty of having this hump means we can fill it with all sorts of exciting equipment, which helps us find out a bit more about the leather suit.
That equipment is a data logging system that includes a GPS satellite unit, an inertial motion sensor, and a computer processor powerful enough to monitor and record up to 130 different sensor inputs at a rate of 1,000 times a second.
We can fit out the suit with any sensor you can think of, be it pressure sensors to identify pressure points in the suit, temperature and humidity sensors to measure the comfort in the suit, and even things like a heartbeat monitor.
One of the most amazing things the sensors reveal is that during a race, the rider's body will move through an arc of 140 degrees as they swing from one side of the bike to the other. Using the GPS unit, the sensors can also follow a rider around the track, measuring G-forces on his body as the bike brakes or accelerates. But the most important measurements are what happens should the rider crash.
With the inertial motion unit, we're primarily measuring the orientation of the rider's body, and then whenever the rider's body is subject to any force, such as an impact, we can work out the magnitude or how large that impact actually was.
That impact can be as high as 5 times the force of gravity.
Example of the accident, if someone weighs 200 pounds, for that very split second, they're going to be experiencing perhaps 5G and weighing sort of 1,000 pounds. Obviously, that's an extreme force, but it's in a very narrow space of time. Yeah, so it is a little bit like an impact, and our job is really to try and make sure that this time for the energy is transferred is really as large as possible.
They spend a tremendous amount of time in the laboratory analyzing the information from their data acquisition system. Understanding that information can help improve rider safety, but there's literally no margin for error.
Obviously, you have to be very careful when you're incorporating technology in the suit, such that we're not actually channeling the force into the body, but spreading the force.
The same premise is used to design riding boots. The idea is to control and redirect the forces of an impact.
Critically, we try to prevent the force of the impact being transmitted to other parts of the leg, so it doesn't explode your knee.
That's why boots are a critical and highly sophisticated piece of riding equipment. A lot has changed at the Alpinestars factory since the company first began making motorcycle boots in the 1960s. Today, the company's boots are as high-tech as boots can get.
And we're looking at the footbed section of the Tech 10 boot. The process actually begins with our designer doing a lot of hand drawing. Then we move into CAD images where we can manipulate the actual shape and construction. From the CAD design, we move to rapid prototyping, which allows us to very quickly make up the sections of the boot that we want to analyze. We have the solid spine, the dark blue part that was on the CAD drawing. We have the heel counter, thick thermoplastic providing good protection in the heel, and thick thermoplastic in the actual forward toe box area. And then we move to the finished article, and this is it, the actual manufactured Tech 10.
Like all Alpinestar boots, all the parts of the Tech 10 are assembled by hand. First, each piece is brushed with a special permanent adhesive, and then individual parts glued together to form sub-assemblies. Those sub-assemblies are then hammered into place. It's a tight fit, but Alpinestars prides themselves on making boots that will not fail or come apart. That would compromise the boot's protection. Each boot is placed onto what looks like an assembly line, but it's actually a machine where heat helps cure the glue. Finally, a multiple density rubber foam sole is fitted to the boot. Then it's placed in a second heating unit, which makes the bond between the boot and the sole permanent. With the boot almost finished, a grinder is used to remove any excess glue. Then a special press punches precise holes for the boot buckle. Again, the entire boot is checked and cleaned. The last step, yet one more cleaning and inspection before each boot is boxed for shipment. Full leather riding gear looks kind of strange if you're just standing around, but on a bike, all that changes. The cut, the fit, and the function is all about keeping the rider safe.
So after all this design, development and manufacturing, we come down to the three main elements, whether you're a professional racer or a sports bike enthusiast. We have boots, we have gloves, and we have the leather suit.
The top-of-the-line riding boot is really two boots in one. And what's inside the boot is unique. A soft fabric liner with braces running down both sides. These braces, called torsion bars, allow the foot to move, but only up to a certain point. If the foot begins to rotate too far in an accident, the torsion bars progressively stiffen until finally they stop the foot from moving.
That it stops overextension in the rider's foot and stops shock being transmitted up into the knee or into the forefoot.
They call the shiny material on the boots, gloves, and parts of the riding suit external protection. It's made from hard and slippery material called thermoplastic. It helps absorb impact from hitting the ground. But its more important function is to keep the rider sliding should he fall. Because sliding provides time for the energy from the impact to dissipate. A sudden stop would only magnify the impact of hitting the ground.
There is no grab if the rider hits the tarmac, so it doesn't get pitched into a tumble where most of the arms and leg injuries begin to occur.
The suit also has what they call body armor. Hard plastic and shock-absorbing foam pieces built into critical areas like the shoulders, arms, and legs.
There's hard protection in the elbow, keeping the rider safe if he touches down. We have knee protection and again in the shin to make sure that the rider is well protected in the lower leg.
There are 27 distinct bones in the human hand, and they are all especially vulnerable in a fall because the hand is often the first part of your body to hit the ground.
The thermoprotection on the wrist and across the knuckle keeps the vulnerable wrist well protected. The higher points of the glove are in the thermoplastic areas rather than down in the wrist.
All the technology and materials used in the gloves, boots, and riding suits have a very important trickle-down effect. What starts on the track will someday end up on the street.
We have seen MotoGP, AMA Superbike, the top level of world-class road racing, steadily become safer and safer, with riders generally suffering less injuries as a result of accidents. And certainly that technology being flowed down into road users has seen the level of protection for road riders improve greatly over recent years.
The goals are simple. Extend the time of any impact by helping riders slide rather than come to a sudden stop should they fall. Provide impact-absorbing protection in critical areas. And make it all cool and comfortable to wear, the design language of a very special form of apparel.
It's a science now to protect you. The way they put together their gloves, their boots. And so you are seeing motorcyclists that dress correctly spend fewer days in the hospital when they make a mistake. Companies like Alpinestars have decided that, okay, we're going to make mistakes as humans on motorcycles. Let's limit the pain we have to feel from those mistakes. They're not saying we can protect you in all cases, but you will be better protected in their equipment. You'll be more comfortable in their equipment. You will enjoy the sport more in their equipment.
Alpinestars combines science and classic Italian hand craftsmanship to create some of the most advanced riding gear anywhere. And hand craftsmanship is the key at Bimota, where they build extremely rare motorcycles. In the world of motorcycles, both share uniquely Italian sensibility for style, fashion, and exclusivity.